Family-owned Gig Harbor Brewing has been making delicious, easy-drinking beers since 2015. Come by one of our tap rooms, the Harbor Tap Room along the waterfront in Gig Harbor, or our Tacoma Tap Room and Brewery on South Tacoma Way in Tacoma. Visit the tap rooms, mention the code word GIGLY, and we'll take $1 off your first pint. For the most up-to-date taproom info, please Google Gig Harbor Brewing or find us on Facebook and Instagram. This is Gig Harbor Brewing founder John Fosberg, and I'll see you in the tap rooms.
I remember that time when we had a last fight. Words were said out of line. They were your words, not mine. Do you ever look back and think about all the things you could have said? Replay them over again inside your head. This is the Revisionary Podcast. Stories of all we would have done in the past. This is the Revisionary Podcast with your host, Juan Carlos. The Revisionary Podcast.
Welcome to Redux, a podcast about music, by a music lover, for music lovers. I'm Van Berryman, math teacher by trade, podcaster by hobby, former radio host and production coordinator, and avid music lover. Step into Redux for deep looks into album reviews with a concise but thorough comparison of an artist's first album to their most recent and their journey to get there. Plus, top 10 lists, best ofs, and other musical inputs to get you through the day. If you like what you hear, drop a follow on Instagram at Redux Podcast and feel free to let me know there what reviews you want to hear. Come along on this journey with me, sit back, and enjoy the ride.
This is the Revisionary Podcast. Stories of all.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Revisionary Podcast. And as always, I'm your host, Juan Carlos. So, normally I try to tell you little tidbits of things that are going on, but I'm actually going to jump right into this one. Mostly because this week we have Andrew Steiner joining us, and he's such a unique guy, and I'm really excited that he actually agreed to do this. Like when I thought of this podcast, he was one of those people who jumped to mind, who I was like, you know what? He might be really interesting to have on. Only because he's just such an adventurous person who I feel like has done so much. You know what I mean? Like, he's very well traveled and he's had all these like really unique experiences. And I just feel like he's full of stories, you know? Like, I feel like he's someone who's just seen stuff and done stuff that the average person just might not have had the opportunity to do. So I'm glad that he's here. I don't even want to waste a lot of time, really. I just want to hop on this and see if I can get him on the line. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Juan Carlos?
I am doing phenomenal. What have you been up to?
Producing podcasts and working on a YouTube show.
You have a podcast. What's it about?
My podcast, it's called Fake Podcast. I mean, honestly, I'm concentrating more on the YouTube show, so I don't even give a shit about my podcast.
No, really?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about your YouTube show? What's that about?
It's basically a how-to show. So me and my two co-hosts, we pick like a topic like making a table, for example, which we did. And we try to make a table not knowing anything about table making.
Right.
And it turns out bad. And then we find an expert who teaches us how to really make a table.
That's actually a pretty dope concept.
It's been great.
What have you learned so far?
We've had some acting lessons from Vinny Pastore from The Sopranos. That was cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, and we did some dancing lessons. We did how to make fresh pasta and then table making. And I think the next one we're going to do is graffiti.
So you can dance now is what you're telling me.
I'm still horrible, but I'm more comfortable being horrible.
Is this those acting classes paying off and now you're acting humble? Is that what's going on here?
Yes, exactly.
I knew it. You couldn't fool me for a second.
Is that your detective classes?
Yeah, you know what? I don't like to brag everybody, but, in another life, I was a 4-star detective. I don't know what the stars means, but it just makes it sound more official.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't we go ahead and get right into it? Andrew, I'm going to cede the stage to you. Go ahead and tell us your story.
Okay, so I've always been obsessed with finding a calling, finding my place in life, finding a path. Like, what am I supposed to do in life? Like, what am I good at? What will I give back most to the world, and what will be most satisfying to me? And I've struggled, and I like beat myself up about it for, I don't know, 20 years, ever since I was like a little kid. Like, I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I wanted to be a baseball player, and I sucked at all those things.
Right.
But that didn't stop me from pretending that's what I was going to do.
Those acting classes again.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess in college, I decided I wanted to be a poet. But I picked I didn't pick a college that was particularly good for poetry. I picked a college that basically would let me do whatever I want. And then they changed that about the college when I got there. And I got there, and I was very depressed. I was in Ohio. I started smoking weed. I didn't smoke weed at all in high school, but then I started smoking weed every day in college. Started, doing psychedelics, and like every week I was doing mushrooms and getting real deep into it. And I wasn't having a good time. I was in Ohio, which is horrible. If you've ever been to Ohio, it sucks. And if you haven't been to Ohio and you're thinking about going to college there and you have a history of depression in your family, don't.
It's funny to hear you say that, because I've been to Cleveland, and I'm not a fan of Cleveland, but I've also been to Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati is gorgeous. I really enjoyed it there. Okay,
maybe Cincinnati's better. But I was near Dayton. I was in a small town called Yellow Springs, Ohio, which weirdly enough, Dave Chappelle is from, and that's where his dad used to teach at the college I went to. And but anyway, so I went there and I had to take all these classes that had nothing to do with poetry, and I was resenting it, and I was doing drugs, and I started getting into music, and I'm a bad singer, so that didn't go that well.
Really? You look like you'd be excellent at Screamo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good at screaming. I can scream a little bit. And I didn't meet Dave Chappelle, but one day I walked outside and I saw Dave Chappelle just sitting on a swing set, or his mom was sitting on a swing set in a full burqa, and he was pushing her. And this was like 10 feet from my dorm room window. And for a second, I almost was like, oh, Chappelle show. I was almost like, hey, how's it going, Dave? But I was like, no, he's with his mom. I'm going to respect him. I'm going to offer him some respect. But, so anyway, I basically failed out of college. And I just decided that I needed to figure out what my purpose in life was. And the best way to do that is to have someone tell me that purpose.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to find a guru. I'm going to find a spiritual teacher who's going to know me better than I could ever know myself, because he's enlightened and he understands reality and he understands people easily, sees through everyone. So I'm going to find that person. So I booked a around the world trip ticket. I booked first stop, Beijing, second stop, Mongolia. Then it goes to Thailand. Then it goes to India. Then it goes to Italy. I don't know why.
Wanted some real pasta from your pasta class. See?
Yeah, maybe my real guru was like a pasta maker, and who knows? I just missed that boat because I never made it past India. I didn't get to India.
Okay.
I got to India, but I didn't get to Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I go on this trip after I fail out of college, and I book it to Beijing. I didn't really meet any gurus there. I met a guy who taught me a little bit about nunchucks. I took some kung fu, but then I went to Mongolia.
Hold on, let me ask you a question. I'm sorry to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
So what's your plan? Like, so you're getting to these places. Obviously, you're saying that you're going to go, find a guru, but where do you find gurus? Like, what was your plan of attack? Because there's no guru store.
Well, India is a guru store. That's their motto. You know how we say "E pluribus unum" on our dollar?
Yeah.
On India's rupees, it says "guru store." Good for one guru.
Oh God. So these are Andrew's views and only Andrew's views. So if we get canceled, just cancel him, all right?
You can't. That's not cancelable. Come on. India has a very long tradition of gurus. there's like people on the streets who are just, their job is to be a spiritual person. They just sit there, dread it out with like, they're smoking weed or doing whatever. And India is a spiritual, emporium for.
Fair enough, but what about the other places? Like when you were arriving, what was your plan of attack?
Okay, well, Mongolia I chose just because it seemed random. It seemed like it'd be a good place to meditate, just because there's nothing there. It's quiet. There's emptiness. You just go into the middle of the desert and you meditate, and maybe some random guru finds you. And I actually did that. When I got to Mongolia, I went out into the grasslands in eastern Mongolia and just decided to meditate by myself in a tent and try to like see if that would happen. And that didn't really happen. What happened, not a guru didn't come to me. A high school senior trip came to where I was meditating and they were drinking vodka and they invited me to join, and I got drunk with this high school trip, and their teacher was there. So it wasn't like kids getting drunk by themselves. It was like their teacher was having them get drunk too. And that was fun. But eventually, I think the next night, a storm destroyed my tent. And that was the end of my meditation in Mongolia.
Jeez, that sounds rough.
Yeah, it was kind of rough. And so anyway, I leave Mongolia and I go to Thailand. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get back in the spiritual swing of things. So I did like a meditation retreat for a week, like a silent 10-day meditation retreat. Didn't really find. Have you ever heard of Goenka?
No, what's that?
He's this dude. He's from Burma originally, and he has meditation retreat centers all over the world, which are pretty cool. They're free. You pay what you want. They feed you. They teach you meditation, good techniques, and all that. But I think. He's dead now, but even before he was dead, because he obviously couldn't be at every temple to like oversee who was going to teach. So he made all these video cassettes in the 80s. So you're just sitting in this room watching this dude like Jazzercise or Richard Simmons teaching you how to meditate. And it's very weird because there are people overseeing, but they can only tell you what they've been told to tell. And it's kind of impersonal. Mm-hmm. So I did that for 10 days, and then I was like, all right, this is enough of that. Finally go to India. By the time I get to the spiritual city of Varanasi, which is like, one of the most spiritual places in India, there's the Ganges, which is a holy river, and they have burning bodies all alongside the Ganges. You see dead corpses just burning. And then there's holy people and all these crazy temples, the monkey temple. And I saw all that, but I spent most of my 3 weeks in Varanasi smoking weed and eating pastries in my hotel room. That was kind of the extent of what I was learning there. So I decided to go take a bus up to Nepal. And that was kind of crazy. You're just going through the mountains, like on a one lane road, and you see like 1,000-foot drop, and there's not even a railing, and people are walking alongside the bus. So you feel like you could kill somebody or get killed at any second. Wow. And I finally got there, got a hotel room, got some more weed, smoked a lot more weed, But I did go to this university. There's a Buddhist university because Nepal, besides being one of the only tantric countries, like their official religion is tantric Buddhism.
So let me unpack this for a second here.
Yeah.
Some of this might have to do with my ignorance. So could you explain to me exactly what that means, a tantric religion or a tantric country?
Tantra is basically the idea that you're going to your experience of life is gonna get you enlightened. It's not that you're gonna sit in some cave in the middle of nowhere forever and maybe next lifetime you're gonna be enlightened. It's like you're gonna get enlightened right now, whether it's by having sex or drinking or being a householder, having kids or whatever you're doing. That is the vehicle for enlightenment.
I see.
And so anyway, and it's also the home of the Tibetans. Like basically, I mean, there's some Tibetan communities in India, but most of them went to Nepal after China took over Tibet. Most of the monks. So there's a giant Tibetan community. There's a giant stupa called Bodhanath Stupa, which is like, it's basically, I don't even know how to describe this. It's almost like a pyramid, but it's kind of round and pointy, and there's eyes painted on it. And there's all these prayer wheels where it's like, there's these metal things where you spin them, and like supposedly spinning them is like saying a prayer. And there's universities that are just like any university, but they're devoted only to the study of Buddhism. So I went there, and I happened to meet a guy who I met in Mongolia, and that should have been sign one that like maybe this was a place I should stay and study with. And I did one class there, and I remember staying after and going to see the master, and one of his students offered him some flowers, and he was like, "These flowers suck. Why are you giving me these shitty flowers?
That's so rude.
After all I did for you, you're giving me these shitty, cheap flowers." And she started crying. And everyone's just looking at her like, "Oh man, I don't know. We like this guy, but I don't know. He made her cry. We might have had the wrong teacher." And he's like, "She knows why." And she's like, "Yeah." And that was it. And I was like, "All right, okay, this guy's cool. He got a football-shaped head. He's all right." But I don't know. I don't know why I decided not to study with him. I think it's because I started listening to like the precursor of podcasts. There were these Dharma talks that this guy had on his website. This guy named Kobutsu Malone, which is Japanese for ancient Buddha, Malone. And I reached out to him because he had all these crazy talks about like anarchy as a Buddhist anarchism, and like protest as a form of Buddhism, which I liked. I was kind of into the whole political thing, and because a lot of the knock on Buddhism, you know, you think of these people just running away from the world and not really doing anything actually. Right. But he was engaged. I mean, that was his whole thing, engaged Zen. He actually worked as a chaplain on death row in Arkansas, and teaching like death row inmates how to meditate. So he was a pretty interesting guy. So I was like, all right, let me reach out to him. And he was from Maine, but he said he was going to be in Japan. And I was like, all right, I'll go to Japan. I'm not going to learn how to make pasta after all.
Right.
So I hop on a plane from Nepal, go to Japan, go to meet this guy. And he basically tells me he can't teach me. He can't. Why? Because he doesn't have a temple. He's kind of like, he used to have a temple in Maine, but you know, he doesn't have a temple anymore. So he tells me to study with his son's teacher, who he was visiting. He was visiting his son there at this like 300-year-old monastery in Japan, in Western Japan, where it's basically a Japanese master. There's a translator who was like a hippie who came over in the 70s, this lady, Chisan, and basically all people from all over the world, from Europe, from America, a couple from Asia. There was like a weird cast of characters. There was a poet from Spain, this old guy, an ex-heroin addict painter from Louisiana, Irish alcoholic guy. There was this guy from India, there was like a ex-Polish hitman. There was a French swordsman. It was like something out of an anime. It was like all these weird people. So eventually I decide, okay, I'm going to be a student. So I move out of the guest house, start sleeping in the meditation hall. You're basically just sleeping on a straw mat next to other people. And it's intense. You're meditating like 6 to 8 hours a day, waking up at 3:30 in the morning, you know, then you're working, you're begging in the streets, dressed as like a 17th century monk with the hat and the straw sandals. And it's just like it is a cult, but it's not a cult with the intention of taking your money or sexually abusing you. It's a cult with the intention of actually making you a great person, a good person. But it's still a cult. You know, everyone is still not really questioning things. It's kind of anti-intellectual because it's all about being in the moment and seeing reality. But according to Zen, reality is non-conceptual because our thoughts, you know, and concepts they can only sort of outline reality, but they can't. Reality is like a multi-dimensional thing. So obviously, it can't be reality. Your thoughts about reality are not reality.
First off, whoa, seems a little meta. But let's back up here. I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
So all these conversations that you're describing, all of these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
are they being communicated to you through a translator, or are they speaking English? Explain to me how that's going.
There is a translator, and she does some of that. There's also Kobutsu, who I can ask. You know, I ask about certain things, but I'm kind of like in awe. I'm kind of a little starstruck. You know, like, oh, this guy is cool. He like gave me his old monk's bag and his like, you know, I'm a little starstruck. I'm like, oh, this cool ass monk is like giving me the time of day and teaching me all this cool stuff. And then also the other students. You know, a lot of it's like learning about sex on the playground. You know, you just like find it out and they might not be true. They might not be applicable to you yet, but you start to just take them as truth also.
Okay.
And they also had brochure. They had like little booklets, like what you should know for meditation. But honestly, none of that was very helpful. I mean, it was helpful, but it was not what I needed to hear. What I needed to hear is by no means, like, no matter what you do not force anything.
Mm-hmm.
Do not force yourself to stop thinking. You know, yeah, it's great to have this whole ideal about being completely still and peaceful and in the moment and, you know, empty of thought and emotion. But if you push those emotions away or those thoughts away, you're kind of doing double damage. You're kind of worse than you started. And I was doing that.
So at this point, are you feeling trapped? Like you can't escape? Because you kind of did describe it as a cult.
Not at all. No, I never felt like I couldn't leave. I felt like I found some kind of path. Because when you're in a community and everyone's doing the same thing and the intentions are good, you kind of do feel like you found your calling, even if you haven't, because at least you found your calling within that community.
Okay.
So I never felt like I couldn't leave, but I started just feeling anxiety and anger well up in me, and just like all these. Because also another thing, that it was meant to be a pressure cooker. You know, this is a place meant to make you push yourself to your breaking point of normally viewing reality,
mm-hmm.
so that you can break through and have some kind of awakening about what the real nature of reality is.
Okay.
So there's some intention behind that. It's not just like, oh, they're bad at running their temple. So there's that also to take into account. Like I said, sometimes you're meditating 12 hours a day, mm-hmm. and you're completely silent for a week. So that's intense. And then there was the whole thing, you're not supposed to masturbate because it's a waste of energy. So that adds up. You know, I was 20 years old, so I had like a libido pent up like crazy. And I'm just like here, not even masturbating. And so eventually I did get to the point. Kobutsu said he was going to leave. And I was like, all right, well, if I don't even have this guy to balance out this kind of, I feel bad saying it's a cult because they are good. I would go back for a week and meditate.
Right.
You know, it's not a bad place. It's just I was too immature spiritually and as a person to really take it as it should have been taken.
I think that's a fair criticism.
Yeah. So anyway, Kobutsu left, and I decided I was going to leave too after 2 months. I was there for 2 months. I was supposed to stay at least a year. And I left, and I fell into like an intense depression. Like I never got really suicidal, but I think I was getting close to there. I got to the point where I was just like, I want the world to burn. You know, maybe I was getting in school shooter mode. I don't know what happened. I was losing it though. I was working in Borders Books as a barista, mm-hmm. and just, you know, I wasn't happy. And then I started playing music and eventually went to school for music, and I kind of felt better.
Hold on. So you said you left after 2 months. Where did you go?
At first, I went back to my friend's house, who ran a farm in Japan. And I stayed there for a week or two. I remember I went to a strip bar my first night out of the monastery. No, actually, not. It wasn't a strip bar. It was just like a club, and there was a stripper there, and I was talking to her, and I remember she wrote the Japanese character for sexual desire on my hand, and she said, "I have a boyfriend. I like you, but I have a boyfriend." And yeah, that's where I went, and then I went home. I went from Japan back to New York after a couple weeks, I think.
Okay, so walk me through this. So you're in New York, right? You're saying, I know you said that you ultimately went back to school, but I guess did you feel like you accomplished what you set out to do? Did you get what you needed from your trip?
I mean, I didn't find anybody to tell me what I should be doing with my life. I didn't find, I mean, I guess they did tell me I should be staying at the Zen monastery indefinitely until I'm enlightened or whatever.
Right.
And I didn't figure it out on my own. I mean, I did kind of realize I like music, I guess. And the depression kind of made me need music as some kind of outlet. So there was that, but no, I didn't accomplish what I set out to do. Okay.
And you know, like you said, you studied music, you know, you use music as your outlet, but you're a comedian now. How did you make that jump?
Well, I got my degree in music, and around the time I started to graduate, I mean, I kind of always was a little funny, you know, like just a little wild. And I think I once tried to do comedy at Bowery Poetry Club once, but it was very bad. And it was like half poetry, half comedy. And I did comedy at one open mic in New Paltz where I went to college. And I think basically I was playing music, and in between songs, I was having more fun talking to the audience than I was playing the music.
Right. Okay.
So that's how I got there. And I think the music, you know, I mean, I produce podcasts for a living now. That's my gig now. I'm a professional podcast producer.
Nice.
So if I had not gone to school for music, that wouldn't be my thing.
Right. No, that makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So then let's go back to your story, and what specifically are the elements that you would change about it?
I would change. First of all, I wouldn't go to Ohio. I'd go to Southern California. Any college, doesn't matter what their specialty is. I start surfing, you know, I grow my hair out long. I'd remember to brush it so I didn't lose all of it like I did now.
So for those of you guys who are listening and haven't met Andrew, you guys should, first off, you should look him up on Instagram so you can see what I'm talking about. But he does not have hair on top of his head. All of his hair is in this thick, luscious beard that he sports.
Yeah. So I'd be out on the beach, you know, I'd be surfing the waves, be macking it to the ladies. You know, I'd just get good at surfing. I'd become a beach bum. And then I'd take the world championships. I'd be the next Kelly Slater. Then all of a sudden, I'd die in a shark attack. That's what I would do.
I did not see that coming. That got a little morbid at the end.
Or I'd talk to Dave Chappelle. And I'd be like, "Hey, man, your mom seems cool, man." He'd be like, "You're funny, man. I'll take you on the road." And I would have started comedy like 6 years early, right. And then I'd be a famous comedian. I'd be blowing up right now. You know, I'd be killing it. Or I would have taken that Tibetan guru as my guru in Tibet. And then he would have told me to go to a cave, and he would have told me some secret Mahamudra, Dzogchen stuff, and I'd be getting meditation powers, right? Because the Tibetans actually believe in like magic powers.
Right.
So I'd be flying. I'd start a sex cult because I could fly. Everyone would want to be in it. You know, I'd be getting laid like crazy. Then I'd go on TV, and I'd have like 1 billion Instagram followers. And then I'd still do comedy as the flying guy.
You know, why do I feel like at one point in your life you might have been a recruiter for that cult up in Albany?
What cult was that?
So I don't know too much about it. I haven't actually researched it, but
the state senate?
Huh?
The state senate?
No, not the state senate. I think there's a show about it called The Vow where they discuss it. It's yeah, there's like some weird cult in Albany, which is right in our backyard, so that was kind of weird for me.
Yeah.
Hold on. So let's go back here for a second here.
Yeah.
So it seems to me like a lot of your problems you think were based on the location in Ohio, not the school, because you mentioned earlier that you went there because they would have let you do what you wanted. So if they had, do you think you would have been happy at your school?
I would have been much happier because I mean, I feel like all my motivation went away when I was, first of all, it was an expensive school, and I was paying all this money to specifically like learn poetry and try to figure out what I want to do specifically. And then they're just throwing me in a bunch of other different directions.
And
so
what did you want to do with that poetry background?
You know, be poor. No, I don't know, man. I think the poetry turned to music though, because
right.
I realized no one cares about poetry, so you got to put it as lyrics. And yeah.
No, look, that's very fair. So now the first thing that you mentioned changing was going to school in California. Does that have to do with the weather or more like the location? Like, what about California itself do you think would have made you inherently happier?
I think the weather, yeah. I think just the sun alone and just being near the ocean and the people also, the vibe of the people. Because everyone at that school, like it was a super radically left school, which is, I mean, I guess I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. Maybe there's something wrong with it. But it was just like everyone was so political, like that no one was having fun.
Okay.
You know, and I think I needed a little more light and like health versus like radical revolution.
Do you think that coming from a place like New York made it difficult to assimilate to a smaller town?
Yeah, I mean, there was that, but it was more just that it was flat and cold and there was no water and everyone looked like a pilgrim. So when I got high, I thought they were all trying to murder the Jew.
Oh my gosh. So, I meant to ask you this earlier, so I want to touch upon this. So as someone who has like never done any drugs, I actually don't know what it's like. So what is it like when you're on psychedelics? Like, what's that feeling like?
Well, the interesting thing is a lot of the monks, like Kobutsu and the translator, they were brought into Buddhism via psychedelics, because in the 60s, a lot of people had this experience where they're like, oh, reality can be so much more than what I've been experiencing. So they seek out spirituality. But it's not a replacement. Some people start to think that psychedelics are a replacement for spirituality. And I don't think they are. I think they're more like a taste of what could happen. Though I guess there are traditions. There are like South American traditions and African traditions where, you know, as a rite of passage, you use psychedelics and the shaman uses them. Mm-hmm. So I guess I can't say that across the board. But as ignorant, unbaptized Westerners who like haven't been shown how to use them in a disciplined way, yeah, I think they can be mistaken for a spiritual path. But really, I think they're just a glimpse into that. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only way I can describe it is like you're used to seeing the world from your perspective. Maybe if you're very compassionate, you see it from your friends' perspectives, or your girlfriend or your boyfriend's perspective. But at least what it feels like is when you take a high dose of a psychedelic, you see it from everything's perspective all at once. Not just every person's, but every rock, every molecule, God, you know, space. You see it from every perspective all at once.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty cool. And you also mentioned how you wish you had taken up that Tibetan monk to be your guide or your guru. So walk me through what you feel would have happened. Like, what would have been different? How would your life be different today if he had been your guru?
I would have probably gone into a cave for a couple of years.
I get that part. You said that part. But what I'm saying is, specifically, what do you wish you had learned from him?
self-discipline. I would not be scratching my foot right now as I talk to you. I'd be right here. My feet would be both down. I'd be looking you directly in the eye.
Right.
You'd stop. You would be like, oh, why did you wouldn't be like, why did I book this guy? You'd be very happy you put me on your podcast right now. And you'd be like, oh man, this guy radiates so much love and joy and compassion, and he's floating, and yeah, man, he's a beautiful man.
All right. So, okay, no, but so you mentioned that would be different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess, what would you have taken from his message? Like, what do you think that would have led to? Like, yeah, he would have put you in a cave, but that's it. Would you have been sitting in darkness for 8 months, or would he have been visiting you? Like, walk me through this. I'm trying to figure
I think he would have been more detailed with his instruction of me. So I think I would have become a better meditator much quicker, which probably would have helped my depression much earlier. And yeah, I think I'd basically be where I am right now, but 5 years ago, maybe. See, that's the thing. Reality, it's so impossible to like think about where I would have been. Any number of things I could have gotten eaten by a snow leopard. I could have married a Nepali woman and had a family in the Himalayas. I could be a farmer right up there, you know.
I mean, but I think that's what makes this fun, right? It's the opportunity to explore what could have been. Obviously, you can't account for everything, but there's a sense of freedom in that you get to write your own story.
Yeah. Like I said, I would get superpowers, man. I really am obsessed with that. And so I imagine myself, you know, just one day realizing I can shift reality to my will. I can open portals in space-time. I can teleport. I can manifest gold. I can fly, you know, and I just start abusing these powers willy-nilly and make myself rich as hell and famous as hell, and then I regret it. I start crying. I'm like, I'm still not happy. I'm on the David Letterman show. He's like, come on, Andrew, show me your flight. And I'm like, nah, motherfucker, I'm sick of this shit. I'm more than just a trick monk. And I start weeping, and then I explode the audience. I kill about 30 people, and I run away. And then I start going into hibernation, and I realize, oh my God, I've done a horrible thing. I should have just become a podcast engineer. but then I come to terms with the fact that I have all these powers. I have all this responsibility. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to make up for it. I killed 30 people. Well, I'm going to save the lives of 30 million people. So I start feeding the hungry. I start producing gold for the poor, and I start having sex with the ugly. And
oh my gosh. Because you're such a gift to humanity. My apologies.
And so their kids are slightly better looking than they would have been. And that's what I do if I studied with that guru.
So do you guys remember how I said these were Andrew's views and Andrew's views alone? Don't forget that part, okay?
Yeah. Does that work?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Wow. So, the last question I'll ask you is, what do you feel you've obviously gone through a series of changes and how things would have developed, but what do you feel like the impact of your changes are?
The change. Wait, how do you mean?
So, okay, for example, you told me what would happen, like what you would change and what would happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end result of all of them, are you happier? Are you a happier human in your opinion?
I think I'm a much less happy human being if I murdered 30 people and I have so much responsibility. You know, I have the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like now I'm basically a superhero. I basically I'm indebted to the world, and I can't do nothing that doesn't serve humanity. And sometimes I feel that way anyway, but I have nothing to give, but I have much less to give, so I feel much less responsibility.
It's interesting you say that, because I feel like sometimes as humans, whether we mean to or not, we allow ourselves to feel like Atlas And sometimes I feel like that statue is one of the most descriptive like traits of humanity. You know what I'm referring to? The one where he has his hands to his back and he's holding the world literally on his shoulder.
Right, and he's got a butt plug in.
I don't know about that.
I might have projected onto him. I'm sorry.
That got weird. Yeah, but anywho, I feel like that's a common feeling. Like I feel like people feel like we have the weight of the world on our shoulders. And on that note, why don't you go ahead and tell us where we can follow you?
Yeah, just follow, check out Knowledge Daddies on YouTube and knowledge.daddies on Instagram. That's that show that I mentioned in the beginning. And yeah, Me in the World, if you check it out. I promise my co-hosts aren't as weird as me. So there's it's not all me talking about butt plugs. So check that
out. All right. Can we follow you on Instagram?
Yeah, at Andrew Steiner without the A.
Oh, really? Didn't notice. All right. And the last thing is we have a tradition on the show before we let you go. Could you tell us a quick story from your childhood that, makes you happy or brings a smile to your face or generally makes you feel warm?
I remember going to this Native American island off the coast of Seattle. And I remember being pretty bored the whole time. They were talking about their culture, which is cool, but I was too young to really appreciate that. And then I remember at the end, they served us clam broth. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the best things I've ever had. Yeah. And it just like, I don't know, it just energized me. It made me feel like a god. It was like, oh my God, this is heavenly. Where can I get more of this? And I've never had anything like that since. I don't even know what island it is or what tribe, but that clam broth always stuck with me.
Yeah, that's a good story. Thank you so much for coming onto the Revisionary podcast. I'm sure Revisionaries are very happy to hear from you. Do you have any last words before I let you go? No,
just thank you so much for having me on. I'm sorry if I said some weird things.
No, you're perfectly fine. Look, honestly, this is a judgment-free zone, and I stress that. I try not to pass judgment on other people because the point of me producing this podcast is that I truly feel that we're all part of the human experience. And I feel like oftentimes we are very quick to talk about our successes and, show off how well we're doing in life. But we don't ever discuss when things get a little hard or, the life lessons that shaped who we are as people, whether they're positive or negative, lighthearted or serious. So I think it's very important. And, I don't judge you for who you are. And in fact, I appreciate the energy that you bring to the world and who you are as a person.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you too.
Yeah. See? So it's not bad. But thank you so much for coming on, Andrew.
The Revisionary Podcast.
You see what I mean? Like, I feel like that story is a very Andrew story. Like all that traveling and all that meditating and like everything is just cool to the core of who he is. And I feel like he and I are such completely different people in the way we approach comedy, but I think he's so interesting to watch to me because he's still able to generate laughs even though he takes a completely different approach. So I've always had a lot of admiration for Andrew, and that's why I'm really happy that he came on. But really, I just want to say to all of you guys that, I'm constantly in awe of you all, and I always appreciate you. I hope that if that hasn't come across yet, I really appreciate y'all. And as always, thank you for listening.
This is